We are moving to the last session, technical session 10. For that, I would like to call Dr. Ritu. I'm sorry. Yeah, Dr. Ritu Magotra. Give me a second. It's taking some
Hello,
time.
it's Ritu Magotra. Hi, good evening.
Ma'am, give me a second. Ma'am, it's taking time to load the things. Yeah,
Okay, it's perfectly
the
all
mic
right.
is yours. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Ma'am, are you there? Ritu,
Yeah,
Dr. Ritu
yeah,
Magotra?
yeah, I'm
Great,
there.
great. Yes, let me introduce Dr. Ritu Magodra, Associate Professor and Head, Government College for Women, Parade Ground, Jammu, India. Ma'am, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Esben. In fact, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the organizing team and especially the Cape Comorin Trust. So, not taking much of your time. So, I think we are already late from the already schedule which we had right from 4:30. So, the first presenter of this session, it's Dr. R. Prabhakar, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Vikrama Simhapuri University, Nellore, Andhra Pradesh, joined by Sri G. Rajakumar, Research Scholar, PhD, Department of English, Vikrama Simhapuri University, Nellore, Andhra Pradesh. And they are going to jointly present a paper on dynamics of social exclusion, issues, trends, and prospects. So, welcome. I think we should start with the session.
Yeah, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
I'm Mr. Rajkumar, ma'am. Actually, I'm here as presenter on behalf of my research supervisor, Dr. R. Prabhakar, and me, Mr. Rajkumar. The topic is dynamics of social exclusion, issues, trends, and prospects, ma'am. And this is an open-ended topic, an elaborate topic also. And I thank the organizers for having given me this opportunity for presenting this topic this evening. Man is social animal, said Aristotle. True to the spirit of the words, man started social life and built societies and nations. And surprisingly, the social animal started social exclusions too. These social exclusions created social tensions, social inequalities, and perennial social segregations also. And we have been discussing the fourth world literature, and it means that there are four worlds. Before coming to the four worlds, I would like to mention about two more worlds, that is the fifth world and the sixth world also. And the fifth world belongs to the intellectuals like Abraham Lincoln, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, Mahatma Gandhi, Rabindranath Tagore, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, etc. These world citizens treat the globe as a nation without any differences and discriminations. And because of these old citizens only, the world is very peaceful. At least some humanitarian sentiments are there in the world. And the sixth world I would like to mention about here is a wicked world. People in this world try to block the progress of women. They try to kill the innocents in the name of God and religion. And they try to create a terror by killing innocents. And these people belong to the sixth world. And this sixth world tries to take the society to dark ages and middle ages also. So from here, coming to the first world countries are the capitalist countries led by America and its allies. The second world countries are the socialist countries, that is communist countries, led by the former USSR. And the third world countries are the countries which have been ruled formerly by United Kingdom and other capitalist countries. And the fourth world, coming to the fourth world does not physically and geographically exist. And ironically, the people of the fourth world exist in all the three worlds mentioned above. The people of the fourth world live as aliens in their own land. They are deprived of their own basic rights, which, according to John F. Kennedy, I quote, the rights of man come from the hand of God, but not out of the generosity of the state. I unquote. But people in the first three worlds, in the name of God and religion, have taken away the rights of the people of the fourth world. And here, it may not be an exaggeration if I say that if another world comes into existence, then the present so-called fourth world may be shifted to the fifth place, as it happened in Indian society. In Indian society, it is said that from the Creator were born only four Varnas. When another social exclusion was added, it was given the fifth place and the last place, with heinous treatment for them as Panchama Varna. Hence, better the fourth world is called either the last world, LAST, last world, or the lost world, LOST, last world. Since the people born in the oppressed and unprivileged categories lose their lives before they are born. The lines written by Kalekuri Prasad, a Telugu Dalit writer, are appropriate to be quoted here. I quote, I don't know when I was born, but for sure I was killed on this very soil thousands of years ago. I repeat, I don't know when I was born, but for sure I was killed on this very soil thousands of years ago. I unquote. Thus, the God-given rights are deprived by the socially established illegal practices such as slavery, untouchability, polygamy, bride price, dowry, gender discrimination, female infanticide, prevention of becoming educated, and many other such social atrocities. Social exclusions are omnipresent and everywhere. Hatred towards by fellow man, took different manifestations. Srirangam Srinivasa Rao, a noted revolutionary Telugu poet, in his book Mahaprasthanam, meaning the Great March, laments about the state of the world in the following lines. I quote, in any country's history, the story of mankind is nothing but of slavery. The story of mankind is nothing but of mutual robbery. The story of mankind is nothing but of bloody and gory, gruesome, ghastly horror, fierce tale of many a fiend. The story of mankind is but of devouring the poor. Mighty races reduce the weaker ones into slavery. Slaughterers rule the world, asking in glory. No place on earth can be found that was not a battlefield. The past wholly soaked in tears, if not in blood. Thus, Sri Sri emphatically enunciates that it is the man's crooked mind that has turned this beautiful world into a burning hell. In such tumultuous world, major epochal events took place at the international level. These epochal events at international level have turned the way of the world from negative to positive. These events were American Civil War, French Revolution, and the Russian Revolution. American Civil War, it was led by honest Abraham Lincoln. The North stood for the civilian rights of the slaves, while the South opposed it. In that Civil War, the highest American casualties took place. Almost 620,000 American soldiers lost their lives. In the South only, about 3 lakh slaves were liberated. That means for protecting the rights of the slaves, the American soldiers fought against Americans and restored the rights of the slaves. Here, the roots of the conflict lay in slavery. Slavery is a, a social exclusion. And coming to the French Revolution, liberty, equality, and fraternity are the noble principles heralded by the French Revolution to the deprived millions. And the Russian Revolution declared social and economic equality to the world. Till then, the working class was suppressed by the ruling class, and the working class revolted against the ruling class and established and tried to establish an egalitarian society. And coming to India, India also is not an exception to the blight of social exclusion. Here, social exclusion started in its most cruel form. People with similar skin color are categorized into graded unequal positions in the name of caste. In the Western countries and African countries, the skin color is a ground for discrimination. The skin color is very much visible. And based on the visible skin color in the Western countries and African countries, racial discrimination took place. But here, the paradox is, it is impossible to identify the caste of a person by looking at him. Even then, it is identified by oral inquiry or otherwise, and continued as a source of social exclusion for millions of years. So, if we go on discussing like this, we can quote many examples. I just quote Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, and he was a scholar, and he was almost knew everything about India and its history. After reading many books, after knowing about the Indian history, standing upon the Indus Valley civilization rudiments, he writes in his Discovery of India, I quote, "What is this India apart from her physical and geographical aspects? What did she represent in the past? What gave strength to her then? How did she lose that old strength? And has she lost it completely? Does she represent anything vital now apart from being the vast number of human beings? How does she fit into the modern world?" And many other such visionaries like Nehru in the modern times, Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, Savitribai Phule, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Narayana Guru have immensely written for the eradication of social exclusions and endeavored for the social unification. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar shines as the brightest star in the struggle for the emancipation of the people of the fourth world in India. Even after independence, though social exclusions are legally banned, they are being practiced at the ground level, even in veiled forms. Finally, to conclude, it can be said that the present generation might be living in four worlds, but the intellectuals of the present generation must strive for one world in future, wherein the oppressed of the fourth world live in with justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. I believe we, the teachers and research scholars, molding the lives of students in the classroom, can build the nation in an ideal way because the future of a nation is designed in the classroom. Being the teachers of language and literature, we can do it because science informs while literature transforms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. In fact, the topic which you had chosen, it was very, very interesting and moreover, very relevant kind of topic. In fact, when you started with and your insights into fifth world and sixth world, which you were talking about, and the relevant examples which you added during your paper presentation, it was very exhilarating, very, very interesting for us. And especially you're talking about society, taking society to dark ages. And I think each one of us sitting over here would definitely think about the social exclusion, that it is exactly what nowadays we people suffer from, right? So
Yes,
talking about the combination, it's the linked problems, talking about the unemployment, talking about the low wages, then talking about the poor skills. So I really liked your topic. It was so
thank you.
interesting, and especially the quotes which you talked about and the examples which you added to it made your presentation. In fact, it was loaded with lots of different ideas, and I
Okay,
really
thank you.
loved the topic. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if there are any questions from the rest of the participants, any one of you, if you like have any kind of doubt or you want to ask anything, because I really love the topic, so I have no questions at all. Any one of you, or should we move towards our next presenter? No. Okay, sir, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Now, moving on to the second presenter, it's Karya Riba, research scholar, Department of English, Northern Eastern Hill University, Shillong. And the topic is deconstructing the native archetype, the self in Magpie's Perma Red. Hello, do we have Karya Riba? Hanji Espin, sir?
Uh,
Karya Riba is there?
uh, no, there is no one in the name of Karya Riba here. We shall
No.
move to the next one.
Yeah, then we'll be moving towards the next one. Okay, next is Sharon Rachel Bergsay from Catholic College, Panthanamthitta. And the topic is Social Protest in Literature, Analyzing Karan Mahajan's The Association of Small Bombs. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. So, good evening, all. The title of my paper is Social Protest in Literature Analyzing Karan Mahajan's The Association of Small Bombs. As we all know, literature is an arena of rapid evolution and it always sought to reflect the changing conditions of human lives and society. The social protest novel, also known as the social problem novel, I quote, it is a work of fiction in which a prevailing social problem such as gender, race, or class prejudice is dramatized through its effect on the characters of a novel, I unquote. And it also addresses problems in works including poverty, violence against women, rising criminality, communal rights, social conflicts, cultural and religious differences, epidemics, and so on. The social protest novel places an emphasis on the idea of social change. Protest literature has existed in different forms throughout the literary history. Many of the important writers awaken the societies to local and universal injustices and encourage them to correct them. The writers exhibit their frustration and worry over the social disputes. I quote, the notion of literature of protest in the global supply chain has different interpretations by different people. For the social and historical critics, literary reformative calls ought to have a specific political objective. So, about the author Karan Mahajan, he is an Indian American novelist, essayist, and critic. And his first novel is Family Planning, and his second novel is The Association of Small Bombs. And the second particular novel was a finalist for the 2016 National Book Award for Fiction. Both of his novels present the desire of the members of a minority to be understood by the majority larger section. So, about the social protest in the Association of Small Bombs. Karan Mahajan's novel The Association of Small Bombs opens in 1996 with an explosion in a market at Lajpat Nagar in Delhi. Tushar and Nakul Khurana, the sons of Hindu couple Vikas and Deepa Khurana, have been sent to pick up the family's TV from the repairman and bring their friend Mansoor, who is the only son of Muslim couple Sharif and Afshin Ahmed, along to drop him at his home. Instead, the bomb set by the Kashmiri bomb maker Shauki kills the Khurana boys and Mansoor is left with wounds. Since the boy's death, the Khuranas led a mechanical life. Though Mansoor left for the US for studies, the pain in his hands made him return back to India. Then he joined an NGO where he got a calm Muslim friend Ayub. But when Ayub sees the indifference of the government, police, and media towards the grief of the people, he too joins the terrorist cell and instigated the second blast in the novel. After Ayub's death, the innocent Mansoor got arrested, and the novel ends with Mansoor's release and his decision to not go outside his home ever again. So here, Mahajan's terrorists are small men from the fringes of Indian society who are prepared to commit mass murder to further their cause. The politics of Kashmiri separatism forms an ominous but hazy background to the novel. He brings social and political currents in which the characters are trapped. The lingering tensions between the Hindu-Muslim factions of India and the Kashmiri issues revolve around the post-independent India since partition, and the novel thus has contemporary relevance. The novel explains social protest made with respect to the religious separatism and cultural disparity in modern India, and hence its outcome involved violence and negative effects of radical protest. It is based on the real incident, the 1996 bomb blast in Lajpat Nagar Market, Delhi, that killed 13 civilians and injured 39 others. Social protest is articulated in the novel in how the religious extremist Shauki planted the first bomb as a means of his protest against the government. I quote, "Modern man has no way out but to choose protest for existential as well as social reasons," I unquote. Shauki had killed dozens of Indians in revenge for the military oppression in Kashmir, expanding the JKIF's theater of violence, and the bomb in Delhi was meant to be a signal to the central government about the elections they were organizing in Kashmir. The Hindu-Muslim racial conflict and biases are evident in the novel. To live is to protest. I quote, "Protest of an individual is not confined to him alone. It is reflected in society as well. It cannot be separated from social, cultural, and political circumstances," I unquote. The minorities' trauma relies on the discrimination shown against them by the major factions of the society, and they consider the government as a majority Hindu and tries to subvert it by perpetuating the violence and terror. The stigma attributed to the whole Muslim community as terrorists increased after the 9/11 blast. Violence was taken as a means to express the rivals' rage against the government that is indifferent to their trauma. It is because, I quote, "The awareness of protest arises when man confronts an unjust and inhuman situation. The foundation of protest is laid when man becomes conscious of his rights and puts himself into the struggle. Consciousness towards fundamental rights, tendency to struggle, and a sense of independence and liberty are the basic ingredients of protest which are liable to come into conflict with the dread power of the establishment," I unquote. Mahajan was able to reflect in his novel the agony that he felt, and he brings us closer to feel the blast that happened as a result of the marginalization of the minority sections. But Shauki's friend Malik says that it is not only the minority groups that are not listened to, but also the common masses in general. So he says in the novel, I quote, "What these victims go through is similar to what we all have gone through as Kashmiris. Something bad happens to them. They expect the government to help them, and instead the government ignores them. Most blast victims don't get compensation for 2 or 3 years. All these people eventually turn against the government. We need to win over these people, show our solidarity with them, tell them that our hands were tied. We were only trying to expose to them the callousness of the people they have chosen to elect," unquote. Here, a corrupting indifferent government and its religious predilection drives the people to take such violent methods and extreme points of terrorism. But it becomes disastrous for the whole community and to the society. It is hatred that is often familiar between the haves and have-nots. However, such radical forms of social protest are meaningless, hopeless, and useless. What the protesters normally desire is a society that could give them equal rights, opportunities, and treatment as other members of the mainstream society enjoy. But in the novel, the Kashmiri issues actually took up a different stand. What motivates people like Shauki and Ayub to carry out the same level of protest depended on the intensity of the partiality that they commonly have faced. The novel's title indicates its place in the literature of social protest. The two bombings depicted in the novel and several other attacks in the modern world act as severe forms of protest often undertaken by the oppressed groups against the social evils like unequal treatment in rights and opportunities, cultural segregation, political differences, and religious separatism and prejudices. Such protests resulting from the marginalization and suppression of minority sections have contributed to the thread of the plot, and the novel becomes a product of the association of such bomb protest. The modern concept of protest includes scientific consciousness, social philosophy, class struggle, and political vision. The names given to the chapter divisions in the novel can also be connected to different elements in extreme states of social protest, and the chapter titles include Blast May 1996, and it describes the bombing, and it is followed by the chapter Victims May 1996, and it is followed by title Terrorists May 1996, and it explains the planning of the attack as well. I quote, literary protest is multidimensional and is concerned more with the ironies, contradictions, and paradoxes inherent in the expression of protest. I unquote. Shauki's ironic character can be seen when he fights for Kashmiri independence but adopts Western taste and he has not seen Kashmir in 2 years. This is his way of protest. He at times was sympathetic towards Delhi but again becomes adamant about his plan to plan the blast there. Another paradox is that the terrorists' violent protest with the intention of favoring their community actually fails some of the members of their own community, and this can be seen in the pathetic existence of Mansoor and Ayub after the blast. Moreover, the resentment of the people towards the government that they elected also serves as a contradiction. Politics play a major role in the creation and suppression of social protest. The political bias creates friction in the society, and this friction is suppressed through an approach that becomes beneficial to the major power and religious factions of the society. The callousness of the bureaucracy, media, and social institutions like police and courts are shown in the novel, which are also the main causes of social protest and regional conflict in the contemporary world. Here, I quote, protest transcends the primary impulse to refuse and it transfuses it into an activity of turmoil, unquote. The tragedy of ignored pain, of media selective attention, encourages large-scale terror. It was indifference of the media and the government towards the NGO that made Ayub to plan the second blast in the novel. He thinks, I quote from the novel, how difficult it was for educated Muslims to get jobs or even housing, and this paranoia infected every future he could imagine for himself in Delhi, I unquote. The partial treatment of the minority that favors a majority can be seen in various realms and aspects of the society. Its perpetration results in the uprising of the subjugated sections from a wounded collective consciousness. Encountering the indifferent attitude of the world around gradually hardens the mind to bear terrorizing effects. Social protest evolves in its course and approach. In the novel, social protest is liberal with the NGO, but it is radical with the militants. The NGO demonstrated a non-violent form of protest for ensuring justice to the falsely accused terrorists who are railroaded by the corrupt police. Shock is when Malik was arrested mistakenly even though he stood for non-violent defense. Mansoor too was imprisoned without any proof for his involvement in the blast and was released only after 12 years. So when social protest is an act of liberation, it also interferes in the individual lives and breaks it. It was a violent protest by the militants that killed the Kurana boys and that broke the family life of Vigas and Deba. The after effect of the protest was so painful that it tears away the friendly ties between the Kuranas and the Ahmads that once transcended their religious differences in their locality, and it also put almost all of the characters in trauma. The communal harmony was here disrupted by the social protest perpetrated by the militants. There are cases prevalent in India where a number of innocent people have to suffer for the consequences of the other accused people. There are also instances where the poor suffer for the unjust actions and crimes of the mainstream people. Such actions curtail the trust of the citizens towards the legal system and judiciary. So when any sort of social protest is neglected by the government, people start violent protest, as in the case of terrorism mentioned in the novel. Social protest attains extreme levels when they are not addressed to by the government. These show a dangerous cause and effect relation of social protest. Social problems lead to protest of every kind, and the protest can in turn lead again to other social problems, as we can see in this novel. So I conclude by saying that all this depict that at certain times the causes of protest and violence cannot be termed as wholly the layman's responsibility, because various levels of suppression and oppression imposed by the major power structures upon the society can also lead to social protest. The need of the hour is to ensure peace and social harmony in the society, and it should be done from a basic level, that is, from the foundation of the society structure. The corrective notions should be straightened so as to establish decent and peaceful societal and power structures in the future. Misunderstandings and misconceptions should be eradicated, and proper awareness and negotiations should be instilled in order to clear the differences between the various factions of the society. So Mahajan here displays the pathetic reality and hurdles of the modern society in this novel, and intends to bring about a positive social change that ensures a happy and peaceful existence of mankind in the current world, and it can be done by writers like him through literature. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. In fact, the novel which you have chosen, Karan Mahajan's The Association of Small Bombs, since I belong to Jammu and Kashmir, so I could relate it with myself and people residing in JNK. So I read this novel and it is somewhat very close to my heart. In fact, it's a very expensive and a deeply humane kind of novel, which is groundbreaking, which is ambitious in its scope. And talking about this Karan Mahajan, he's so young, just 31 years of age, and he has written this novel so brilliantly. In fact, talking about the effects of the terrorism on the victims, and also talking about the perpetrators. So he has proved himself that he is one of the most dynamic and provocative novelists of his generation, especially the way he has talking about mapped the nature of terrorist violence. And like I've already told you people that since I reside in Jammu, so like every second or third day, and if you people are listening to news, so we are witnessing these blasts, and in fact it's the common man who is suffering the consequences. So when I was listening to you, the way you were quoting, so deep in my mind, I could correlate the things with what actually is happening in some of the parts of the Jammu, not in proper Jammu, but talking about Kishtawar or Bhadarwah or Rajouri, if you have heard the names of these places, and especially talking about Kashmir. So thank you, Sharon. It was very interesting presentation. Moreover, the topic which you have chosen for the day, it was nice. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, moving on to the next presenter. Again, it's a joint paper presentation by Ms. Ramya, PhD research scholar, NA University, and Ms. S. Sujata, Jaya College of Arts and Science. And the topic is a subaltern study, representation of lumpen proletariat in the select Tamil film. So I think it's a very new kind of a topic, and definitely each one of us is going to enjoy it. Welcome, ma'am. You can start with your topic.
Good evening, all. Hope I'm audible to everyone. Am I?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
you are.
Thank you so much. Good evening, all, and thank you for the opportunity. Without further delay, I would like to start my presentation. Is my PPT visible? Anyone?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's visible. Yeah,
Okay,
it's clear.
thank you. So I'm here to present my paper, Subaltern Study, the representation of lump and proletariat in the select Tamil movie. So before beginning the presentation, I would like to give an overview of it. First, I'll be discussing Tamil movie industry and its caste representation. And since I'm dealing with subaltern and lumpen proletariat, it is better to shed some light on those two terms. And then we'll go to the movie analysis and findings and recommendations. That's how I conclude my presentation. So the first one, Tamil movie industry and its caste representation. I'm not going to read everything, but I've taken two major works about Tamil industry and the history of Tamil movies. The two movies are one is Mr. Stephen Hughes, where he has done research on the origins of cinema and colonial Madras, which I've discussed about the history of Tamil cinemas, and also a book written by Mr. Dr. Velayudham and Vijay Devadas on Tamil cinema in the 21st century. So I've taken these two sources and I've quoted few words about Tamil movie industry. And first, let me start with this. It is here Dr. Velayudham says it's a foremost cultural institution that has shaped Tamil culture and identity. And here Mr. Hughes also says about there are almost 1,300 silent movies were made, and only 14 of them are remembered because there was a period which was taken over by MGR and their other leading artists, where other movies were not recognized well. And he continues to say here, Tamil industry and political part of Tamil Nadu is deeply involved and interconnected. Here, and he says that it is being used as a effective medium by the political parties, especially regional parties, and it is being used as a medium. And he also says that how this cinema has worked against caste system. I would not say they have done pretty good job, but of course they have used caste system and depicted caste-based society through cinema. And here he continues to say when it is caste-based movie, and there were restrictions when they depict or they produce a movie based on caste discrimination, because it is for monetary purpose they couldn't detail elaborate or unbiased about the representation of caste discrimination in Tamil Nadu. So there were some restrictions and they did not want a particular, they couldn't highlight one particular caste and put the audience on the spot. So, and in the same book, being there is an paper on being Dalit, being Tamil by Karthik Ram Manogaran. He has written heroes fighting for lower caste against caste oppression have figured much in Tamil cinema, but heroes fighting as a lower caste against caste oppression have figured less. But there were exceptions in the in the past, like Iranian and Kovilpatti Viralakshmi. It's a bandit films where the heroes, the protagonists, were from the lower caste, and it also had an exception of defeating a caste, an upper class villain, where it's been completely that was not happening in Tamil cinemas. So and every period of Tamil cinema has been influenced by director. It has its own trend also, based on technological advancement, social issues. Like we have this Balachandra's movie where we have strong female leads. We have directed Misu, where it was a family drama of a particular caste. There were so many Bharati Raja of village scenario. So there was a trend based on the needs and social setup or technological advancement. There was PC Sriram at that time, the camera innovations, what he have done. So there is every time has its own trend. And but in midst of all this, when it comes to caste-based movies, the representation in media, the post role models were being rare. So as we move on to subaltern, it's one of the most discussed topic. So I'll just highlight features of subaltern. Uh, I would like to quote Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, a phrase: subaltern has no history and cannot speak. And I continue to say the features of a subaltern: with low ranking in a social, political, and other hierarchy, it has been marginalized and oppressed. And it is a technical term for certain kind of dispossessed person who's been deprived of property or land, or who seem to be homeless. And it also has a feature. Subaltern also have the feature that without the voice of the oppressed. It is even without the voice of the oppressed. Since the time is restricted, I'm just highlighting the important points. If you have any queries, you can post it later. Then I have given some pictures. It was very difficult to find for me to find pictures of subaltern in Tamil cinema or Indian cinema to say, because it was not considered seriously. So I've just taken few pictures. When it is a police movie, a movie based on police department or some crime mysteries and all, we can see that the protagonist is either of some from higher officials, and these constables or lower rank officials are always depicted portrayed as lethargic and not so smart person, and who's just who does a layman's work and not treated well. They just background characters. If you've seen in Tamil cinema particular, for example, I'm taking this happens all over, but for example, I'm saying the village movies in 80s and 90s and all, we have this main protagonist. We have protagonist, and there is a man who's standing beside him, just holding an umbrella. He's either just a filler of the background, or else he's used for some humorous purpose. Either the barber or the cobbler, all these characters, they don't come into a mainstream. They're not treated as a protagonist in any of the movie. Even if they're participating in a movie, they are just a background fillers or just for humor sense. It has been used. So these are the background in cinema. And next we'll move on to lumpen proletariat. It's a so it is a term coined by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. They refer them as unthinking. So the meaning for lumpen proletariat, excuse me, lumpen is a term derived from German language, means rat, and proletariat mean from French wage earners. So they are from the lower. Karl Marx says they are from the lowest stratum of proletariat. They don't have. These are the features of lumpen proletariat. Excuse me. They lack awareness of collective interest. As an oppressed class, they are described as a layer of a working class. They lack class consciousness. They don't know which caste they belong to, and they cannot be used for any revolutionary struggle. They are class of outcast. And Marx in 1852 he says they are the own indefinite. So here it's a quote by historian Robert Buzzard, Karl Marx, and Friedrich Engels about lumpen proletariat. So I'm just highlighting certain phrases here. They are parasitical group who could not normally play a progressive role in history. They are socially ignorant and no self-interest, easily bribed by reactionary forces. They don't have class consciousness. They don't play a positive role in society. They exploit the society. In turn, they are also exploited. So these are the features of lumpen proletariat. So the movie I've selected here is a very common movie here in Tamil Nadu, Mandela. Mandela is a 2021 Indian Tamil language political satire comedy drama. I have listed out the cast here, and let me read only the name of the cast. Nelson Mandela. His name is Ilichavayan in the movie, which means in colloquial Tamil we say an idiot who can take him for granted. Okay, so or else smile, since Ilicha means smile. Smile, Vayan means mouth. Since in another language, I'm trying to translate it. So Ilichavayan means smile, mouth. Okay. So, and he will be named as Nelson Mandela later, since he doesn't have any name on his own. And he have an assistant Gilda. And then we have a female heroine Tenmuri. Then we have Periyaya, who is the head of the village, and his sons Ratnam and Madhi. They belong to Periyaya has two wives, and Ratnam and Madhi are two sons from each wife. And it is being directed by Madon Ashwin and produced by Why Not Studios and Open Wind Productions. As we move on, I'll just give a gist of what the plot is about. It's a story about the character Ilichavayan. Since he doesn't have a name in the beginning, this is the nickname, a degrading name was given to him by the villagers. And he has other names also, Smile and so many other degrading names. And he receives the voting rights in mid of the movie. He receives voting rights lately, and that becomes the deciding vote for the local presidential election between two communities. So the story revolves around this character and towards the election, who wins and how he's been influenced and how he's bribed to vote for any caste of his choice. So here, before getting into that, I have divided the movie into three-part: beginning, middle, and end. Okay, so we can see the transformation or the progress. We can say progress of Nelson Mandela's character from lumpen proletariat to hero. How he's been transformed. As I say, he's a lumpen proletariat and then bourgeois and a revolutionary hero. But the thing is, we cannot justify the entire characterization of lumpen proletariat to Mandela. But we can fix him on that term, on that study, based on few characters, few features, aspects. First one, beginning. First, he stays in a village called Surangudi, where he's not treated well. He doesn't have any caste. He doesn't have his own identification, no name, no family, no history. He's not considered as a human being even by the villagers, and no education thing. He does menial jobs, and in turn he was paid by food, and he gets ration for other people in the village, and he's not treated well. And I have shown you a picture here that he's paid with all the grains in one single sack, and he separates, and in a bus he goes and sits on the steps. He's not allowed inside the car, and but his own perspective is he doesn't bother about it. He's not interested in the social development. He's not interested in his own development. He doesn't bother. He agrees with his position, and he continues to live like that. He doesn't confront. He doesn't fight back. Nothing. He just continues to live like that, and he's not aware of what is happening around him. And then one day, what happens? His money savings get stolen, and he wants to save his money, so he goes to post office to open a saving account, and that is how he starts getting all this identification, ID cards like voter ID, Aadhaar card. So that is how he transforms. You can see that how when his savings have been taken away, when the money has been taken away, he tries to protect that, and that is how he goes to the next step. That is middle. Bourgeois. See, it is not completely justified, but we can see the features of it. As he gets a voter ID, he's been named as Nelson Mandela by Tain Moli, and he gets the voter ID. As he gets the voter ID, the voting count in the village takes place, and both the parties are on equal number. And this voter ID, when it arrives, and everyone is urged to influence Nelson Mandela to vote for their party. Here again, he's bribed. He's bribed, and he's been treated well, and he gets money where he doesn't even get 10 rupees for his work previously. Now he gets 100 rupees, and he gets everything. He stays in under the tree, but he gets everything: TV, fan, and there is a saloon built for him. So all things have been bribed to him, and still he feels he is not content with it, and he does look into the social development or welfare of the village or what he has gained. He doesn't respect or value the rights he has received. Instead, he tries to be very materialistic and exploit the situation. That is how I can see a bourgeois feature in him, where he exploits, and he's very materialistic, and and he has gained the political rights, and he has worked where he uses the identification to exploit others. At the same time, if we see at the end of the middle part, we can see he also participates in the development of others. That is one of the bourgeois feature, and so that is the end. So that happens when he was beaten to death, and he was forced to vote or choose a side, and his assistant helper would seriously get injured, and that is how. So he decides to do something better. So that is the end part, where he uses his rights for a good way. good way. He demands water for the village and renovation of school and construction of public toilet, road, and electricity. All these things he asks and demands because after he was beaten to death, he encounters an experience with a woman where she requests him to help him or use his rights to build a public toilet since they are suffering because they don't have toilet in the village. So that has made him to change his mind and use all the voting rights uh, for a betterment of the village. So that is the end of the story. So I have given two pictures where we can see the first picture. It is he doesn't. This is a scene where he doesn't know how to vote at all because at the first time he have never seen the polling booth. So that's the first time he goes and he was taught to vote. And the two parties start fighting tug of war to push him to their side. And from there, the ending scene here when the two parties plan to hurt him or plan to assault him, that is when all the villagers join together, where he was not even considered as a human being, but other people, all villagers at that point, they join hands and try to protect him. Since he has done a lot of great things for the he's being transformed from nobody to a hero at the end of the movie. And the village was separated, divided because of caste. At the end, because of him, he performs as a bridge without his own consciousness, and makes and unites the entire village, and they protect him for that. And what are the findings? Have we come to the last part of my presentation? What are the findings from my researches? Education, identity, and social awareness is an important factor. There are neglected background characters in Tamil cinema which needs to be represented and participated. There is a false portrayal of masculinity in order to voice out to the oppressed, that everyone needs a hero to come and represent the representation and participation of voices in Tamil cinema. But there is a progressive right now. There are current movies that widen the scope in representation for all the layers of population. More than treated as a medium, it is treated as a forum and a platform, especially in it is treated as a forum and a platform to propagate casteism as well as to fight against it. So the recommendation, the last slide of mine, or second last. So recommendation, I would say cinema industry should have characteristics of both creativity and research aspect. Entertainment and information is needed, and research in cinema and research on cinema should be mandatory to keep the medium original and healthy. And there should be variation in cinema leads to the representation of various social dimensions should be encouraged to create a social awareness. So this is the last slide. This is one of the scene where Mandela looks at the tree, and this it is written Mandela in Tamil. Mandela and Girda, the names of the two characters, written by the helper Girda. He seems to be uneducated and nobody knows he knows to write. And when the main protagonist sees that, and he gets lighted and asks Steinmori to educate him if something happens to him. So that is the concluding point where education is one of the important, a possible tool for all the subaltern, all the oppressed to voice out and represent and as well participate in the social endeavors and development. Thank you. I would like to take queries if it doesn't.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ramya. In fact, it was I'll be using the word, it was a power-packed presentation. Like your colorful PPT along with the pictures, it was a real treat, I think, for each one of us listening to you. In fact, thank you so much for providing us insights into the Tamil movie industry. So it was a new kind of a topic, and the way you cited examples and the interpretations which you made use of, they were very, very engrossing. And especially your association of the concept of lumpen proletariat with the Tamil film. It was very, very interesting. And I was so much engrossed in your this PowerPoint presentation that I never wanted that time should end. In fact, time is a restraint. Otherwise, believe me, we would really have loved to listen more from you. So maybe we'll meet in some other conference, and I'll really love to listen to your presentation. So, any one of you, if you have any kind of questions, in fact, I don't think any kind of question we could ask from Miss Ramya, because everything was so clear, it was so interesting, and it was a kind of a respite from just delivering lectures. तो मेरे ख्याल से whenever we people are in such kind of conferences, so more of PowerPoint presentations will definitely help. Thank you, Ramya. Thank you so much. And I'll really love to listen to you maybe some another time. Thank you.
Thank you. Definitely.
Okay, now moving on to our next participant. It's NR Evangeline, research scholar, Nesamani Memorial Christian College, Marthandam, and Dr. P.J. Githlin, assistant professor, again from the same college, and jointly they are presenting a paper on the topic Avid for Love as a Life-Changing Factor in Khaled Hosseini's The Kite Runner. Anjali?
Good evening, ma'am.
Okay, good evening.
Okay, the topic of my presentation is Avid for Love as a life-changing factor in Khalid Hosseini's The Kite Runner. The meaning for avid is having a eager desire for or a longingness for. Here, I'm giving a brief introduction about the author. Khalid Hosni is an Afghan-born American novelist, and he is also a UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador. He gives, in his novel, he gives detailed description about the background of Afghanistan, its changing political condition, and he also gives more importance to familial aspects in his writings. So, in his first novel, The Kite Runner, he brings out the relationship between a father and a son. And in his second novel, Thousand Splendid Suns, he brings out the relationship between a mother and a daughter. And in his third novel, And the Mountains Echoed, he brings out the relationship between the a brother and a sister. From this, we can come to a point that Khalid Hosseini, he loves the familial aspects of, he gives more importance to family in his writings as well as in his personal life. So, the novel The Kite Runner brings out a troubled relationship between son Amr and his father Baba. Amr is longing to get the love and care of his father from his childhood itself. First of all, a child's development starts from a family. A family is the basic unit of a society which consists of a father, mother, and their children. The parents are the main source who teaches their child to love, to give respect, and to have a proper interaction with the society. So here Amir lacks all this emotional support from his family, and his life has changed upside down when he longs for the love of his family. Uh, Here we can see Erikson in his theory Childhood and Society has quoted a point. The superego of the child is primitive, cruel, and uncompromising, as may be absurd in instances where children over-control and over-construct themselves. Here we can see Amir has developed a sense of insecure feelings in him. He longs to get the love and constant attention from his father, but this is denied to him. On the other hand, his father Baba is very much fond of Hassan, who's a servant boy in their home. And Amir develops a sense, Amir has a very good relationship with Hassan, but here he develops a sense of jealous in between them because Baba is giving more care and more attention to Hassan than Amir because Amir is very he constricts himself from everything. He lacks self confidence. He's always he always develops a sense of low self-esteem, whereas Hassan is carefree, he's brave, he's courage, he's very good in his athletic skills. All these things attracts Baba, whereas the poor Amir suffers emotionally, or he suffered psychologically because not treated well by his father. So Amir is in a quest to, or Amir is on a journey to win the love and care of his father by doing anything, or he goes to any extent to gain the love of his father. So, in an event, in a kite running event, Amir wins the match with the support of Hassan. Here, Amir asks Hassan to bring the kite, uh, which he wins from the match. During this course of event, Hassan is raped by Asaf, who is a rival to Amir. But Amir stands there and watches the whole situation without helping Hassan, because he gives if he goes and help Hassan, first of all he will be damaged, or he will be receiving a lot of uh, uh, punches, or he will be totally damaged by Asif's fighting skills. And second one, he wants to get the kite back without any damage, because the kite here acts as a key to enter into the heart of his father. The kite act as a key to win the love of his father. And so he denies himself to help Hassan. So this event creates a sense of guilt in his life, throughout his life. He's like, I was in a situation to help Hassan, but this to win the love of my father, I restricted myself without helping Hassan. So after some course of event, Hassan leaves Amir, and Amir also leaves Afghanistan and he moves to America. He seeks a kind of redemption. He needs to escape from reality, and he goes in a goes to another country to escape from the guilt he was suffering throughout his life. And from there, we can see Amir is living a different life. He becomes a very good writer. He married Soraya, and he is living a very good life. But also in there, also he has a very troubled relationship with his father. He's not at all happy with his father, or his father is neither happy with Amir. Till the death of his father, Amir tries to win the love of his father, but it was denied to him. So during the course of event, he recollects his memories that he lived in Afghanistan. From there, again Hassan's memories are haunted in Amir's memory. So when we comes as Amir is in a situation to open up, or he's in a situation to confess everything that he has done to Hassan, but he is not ready to open up himself, because he is self constrained himself. Um, he, he self constrains himself from the thing he wants to share with others. So here we can see, as he has a course of interaction with his wife, and he gains a courage that he has to do something to get away the guilt that he has done to Hassan. From here, there comes Rahim Khan, who is a mentor of Amir. From him, he learns that, he quotes, "There is a way to be good again." So Rahim Khan shows a way to be a good again, a path to be good again. So he tells everything about the history of Hassan and Baba. Baba is also the father of Hassan. He had Hassan in an illegal relationship, but it was not known to anyone except Rahim Khan. So he says Baba is also guilt-ridden. He is also his life is also in a hurry, or he in fact is he is also guilt-ridden because his two sons are brought up under different social classes, and he also betrayed his own childhood friend. And this all these events was unbearable to him. So this guilt prevents him to show extreme love and care to Amir. So Amir understands the situation of Baba, and he comes to know that both Baba and Amir are sailing in the same boat. So he wants to gain redemption to both Amir and his Baba. So he rescues Shorab, son of Hassan, who is caught in war-torn Afghanistan, and he was under the custody of Taliban. From there, he shows the courage to rescue Shorab. So the entry of Shorab in Amir's life has brought him a new perspective. So the arrival of Shorab turns to be a light that guides Amir to the path of goodness. So the life of Amir gives us a lesson that a family is more important. The importance of family, family is the most important thing in the development of a character of a man. The love from both the father and mother helps the child to shape their character both emotionally and physically. Amir is brought up as a single parent who does not show any love or care to him. This made Amir to long for his father's love. This made Amir to go for any extent to win the love of his father, even if it comes to the betrayal of his own friend, own best friend. He's unconsciously becomes selfish and jealous person only because of the negative influence that he gains from his father. This affects the emotional well-being of him. The fondness of winning his father's love made him to betray the one who loves him the most. Though it was done unintentionally, the instance affects his life very badly. It takes a long journey for him to realize the mistake he has committed and to get redemption from that. Thus, it's the duty of parents to create a loving, trusting, and caring and loyal environment to their children for their better mental development. Thank you, ma'am.
In fact, thank you so much, Evangel ma'am. It was a very interesting novel you have talked about. In fact, I think each one of us has read The Kite Runner. It's a bestseller novel, and as you all know, that it is set against the backdrop of tumultuous events from the fall of Afghanistan monarchy, talking about the exodus of the refugees to Pakistan and the US, and the rise of Taliban regime, which we are witnessing at present, right? And in fact, the way you have talked about this novel, it has talking about the journey of the loyalty, the betrayal, the redemption. And the message which this Kite Runner it gives to us, it's of like talking about the guilt, the friendship, forgiveness, loss, the desire for atonement, the desire to be better than who you think you are, right? So in fact, eventually, it was a very interesting presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Now, moving on to the last presenter of the day, it's M. Maria Cleston Dias, PhD scholar, and Dr. M. Prabha Punyavati, Head Department of English and Research Center, NM Christian College, Martyrdom. And they are going to present on the topic Crossing Frontiers and Globalized Landscapes in Salman Rushdie's The Ground Beneath Her Feet. Do we have the speakers of the day? Asbin, sir? Yeah, okay.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yeah, welcome, sir. Welcome. You can start with your presentation.
Respected chair and dear participants, the title of my paper is Crossing Frontiers and Globalized Landscapes in Salman Rushdie's The Ground Beneath Her Feet. The book begins on February 14th, 1989, the date the fatwa was issued against Rushdie in Mexico. The moment an earthquake splits the ground under 44-year-old Veena and swallows her. After this tragic opening, Roy Merchant's first-person narrative jumps back to 1950s Bombay shortly after India gained independence from the British. This paper explores how Salman Rushdie blurs the spatial frontiers and boundaries, gives a transnational scope to characters at the same time, keeping the mindscape limitless across culture. The paper analyzes the physical movement of the characters crisscrossing across East and West in search of love and music. Rushdie takes the readers of his novel, The Ground Beneath Her Feet, for a roller coaster ride across the world, blurring the boundaries and landscapes. Not just the physical world, but with the indirect presentation of the ancient classical and Indian mythology, the alternative realities for the characters, and the unbelievable mystical beings and connections. Rushdie gives layers upon layers of realities, context, and meanings. The main characters, Omas Kama, Veena Apsara, and Roy Merchant, crisscross between landscapes, mindscapes, and love. Omas search for Veena as an unending passion. The opposites of cultures are reflected through these central characters, especially with Omas and Veena. Veena, who is not very particular about the monogamous relationships, would play with them both, but would take Omas Kama as her lifelong life partner. As she encourages both Roy and Omas, her sudden disappearance from Bombay surprises both men. Veena is such kind of unbelievable character, and through her, Rushdie shows the idea of not belonging to anyone and anywhere. The callousness is the attitude of American-born Veena and the longing of the men of the East. As the narrator of the most of the novel, Roy shows clearly his feelings for her. Rushdie shows, not in normal tone, what happens among them, but makes the events surrounding her disappearance very momentous by calling their union as earth-shaking lovemaking. Rushdie brings in an intertextuality of classical lovers, Orpheus and Eurydice, as Omas must begin the mammoth search for Veena, as the union of the mythical pair is not blessed by God, and Eurydice, quick death after the nuptials, takes Orpheus even to the underworld in search of her. Kamadeva's untimely death infuriates Rati, who challenges and questions gods for their mistake and brings him back, though in reverse gender roles compared to classical myth. In both this myth and legend, the one lost is not fully regained. Orpheus doesn't succeed, and Kamadeva doesn't come back in physical form. Rushdie does not stop with these simple tales and their line of fates as the usual. Instead, he goes beyond the established stereotypes and notions of love. Veena has seen separation and bloodshed at her young age. She is very comfortable at the merchant's household in Bombay and for New Year's, but her unannounced leaving deserting her lord.
Listening to you, I have read this novel, but maybe some of the things they were not that much clear to me. But today, when I listened, the insights which you provided and the way you presented your paper, some of the concepts they really became clear to me. So thank you so much. It was like wonderful listening to your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
In fact, I think we have ended with our presentations. So the house is open for question answer sessions. So if any one of you have any kind of question you want to ask from your colleagues, your presenters, you people are welcome. Any one of you? I know nobody is going to ask anything, because this is what we people have been witnessing for the last so many years. No questions? Okay, then thank you so much. In fact, it was really a treat. I enjoyed all the presentation. Maybe we just missed one presentation. So thank you so much. All the intellectuals, our research scholars, the professors from different colleges and universities. In fact, each this presentation, it was a kind of an eye-opener, and it was very enriching listening to them. So thank you so much, Esben sir. Thank you.